The IPC's big secret they're keeping from us all. Who do they actually follow as an Aeon? Do they even follow the preservation, or do we have another Penacony on our hands but on a much bigger scale? We know Hoyoverse, we know how they like to tell their stories. It is very likely that the IPC has been infiltrated at the very least by something that is not the preservation. But which Aeon would that be? There are a couple really good candidates that I want to go over, but there's one that stands out way above the rest. Let's go over it. So we know by now that the IPC are not exactly the good guys they like to believe they are. I'm sure that the lower level employees do nothing wrong, they're just trying to work, do their duties, but it's an evil business corporation. But they are clearly one of the villainous groups of this game. That is clear by now. They hide information, they have a path of conquest, they coerce struggling planets, and use very immoral tactics to get what they want. Money, greed, resources, control over the universe and cosmos, and power. And at the helm of this evil corporation are the board members that represent each different department. We know that Diamond is an emanator of preservation, and he has his 10 Stonehearts, all under the strategic investment department. But what about the other board members? What about the IPC as a whole? Do they even represent preservation at this point? Because it seems to me not only do they not follow their Aeon, but they do the exact opposite. Claypoth wants to build walls and isolate worlds, protect from what it thinks is coming. That in itself is going to be a topic in this video, but it's building barriers, not opening up networks between the entire universe, different worlds, and creating this big organization and networking system for profits, travel, communication. That is the complete opposite of what this Aeon wants and it represents, which makes no sense. We know that in Penacony, the family follow the harmony, as well as that whole planet. But Penacony and its dreamscape wasn't so hunky-dory once you actually pulled back the layers. A parasite was growing within Penacony. Anna of Order and its loyal followers infiltrated the dreamscape and seized control from within. So this is a concept that has already been done in the game. And actually, when thinking about the IPC and what they're doing, Anna of Order was a candidate that I wanted to talk about because this Aeon is a control freak. Everything that it did and does sorta actually do line up with the IPC in many ways. Plus, this Aeon personally sought out Claypoth of Preservation during the Swarm disaster to go pound Taseroth into the dirt. Then this Aeon got absorbed by Harmony. But it did link up with Preservation at some point, so I wondered if maybe it got intertwined with the IPC. Jade actually had a cynical little line about this too, saying that you do not need two versions of Order, and the IPC's intention's clear. But when I looked at it again, I think that this is less of her hinting at Order, and more so her stating that this Aeon is obsolete now. They're above Order at this point. And I don't think they'd use that same Aeon for the same gimmick twice in the game. I also thought about Taseroth, the propagation, because the preservation is what defeated the propagation to begin with. So I wondered if Taseroth infiltrated the IPC the same way that Order infiltrated Sheepei of Harmony once it absorbed it. The way that the IPC expands is off the charts. But propagation is more about procreating for the sake of procreating. The IPC aren't just expanding to procreate, they have a goal in mind, so it doesn't quite add up. But there's one Aeon that we know little about, but when you actually take a deep dive into what it represents, I think that the IPC, maybe at one point in its life, did follow the preservation. But the majority of the IPC, I believe right now, follows the Verocity, Ouroboros. And you might be saying to yourself, but that Aeon just consumes everything and eats everything, devourer of worlds. How could that be the Aeon that the IPC with their networking and things, how does that even add up? But Verocity actually means quite a few different things, or could be interpreted in many ways, not just a hunger for something, literally to eat it. Verocity is described as a state of being eager to have a lot of something, an obsession to have an insatiable amount of something. And a better word yet to describe this Aeon is gluttony, one of the 7 deadly sins. And gluttony isn't just an excessive amount of eating or drinking, it's an excessive indulgence into anything. It could be anything. Power, knowledge, an obsession to consume or have a lot of something. And that sums up the IPC very well. And what makes it even more interesting is that Ouroboros and Claypoth are two of the most ancient Aeons in the entire game. I'm pretty sure they are the two oldest Aeons in the entire universe and its history, both Aeons living long before the Amber Eras. We don't know much about Ouroboros, but they took part in the Dusk Wars, a period in history that was a catastrophe and disaster, which took out most of the Leviathans. Ouroboros is a Leviathan that ascended into Aeonhood that became the Verocity. It is said that Mythos does its best to cover up this point in time as well, and the IPC makes all information before the Amber Era start almost ambiguous. They cover it up quite well, and it is said that the Preservation ascended during this time, and that these two Aeons clashed during these Dusk Wars. But the Intelligentsia Guild poking around where there probably shouldn't be, that there are still Leviathans around to this day. Maybe that's why Claypoth is building all of these walls. It knows the capabilities of this Aeon and its followers to consume everything, and so it must build barriers, and it building these walls, always building these walls, and nobody knows why. Perhaps this could be it. Now, am I saying that the IPC doesn't represent preservation at all? Is there any followers of that Aeon actually? Yes, I do think Diamond and his Stonehearts do follow the preservation to a degree, and I do think he's a genuine emanator. We have no reason to believe he's not. However, the other emanator of preservation, Taravan Kane, is interesting to say the least. He is a P-48 head of the building logistics department, an unsympathetic and uncompromising person, willing to prioritize their gains at the expense of everyone else's loss, doesn't matter how poverty your planet is. It also literally states that him, along with his department's job, is to transport materials to Claypoth. But the game even states that it's unknown if he even follows or is a believer of the preservation. And this is the oldest department in the entire organization. That's another interesting detail. And I don't know why, but the game even hints at him being a very overweight man. I know this sounds mean, but all of this sort of points towards him following the path of Verocity or gluttony. I'm honestly wondering if this is an emanator of the Verocity. Even the game seems to think he might not even follow preservation. And then we have Oswaldo Schneider, who is a former Nameless and is a head of the marketing development department, described as passionate and hot-blooded. And because of him, many new worlds join the IPC's network, and they believe he will rise to the ranks very soon. If the IPC is following Ouroboros, wouldn't they be consuming all these planets then? Well, what if they've created a network where they can feed off of all these other resources, all these other planets, and feed their Aeon? Feed that insatiable gluttony hunger for resources, power, influence, control. Because Verocity is an obsession to have more. And it does seem like the IPC in every single aspect is obsessed with gaining more and more. More planets, more networking, more control, more resources, more power, more influence, more money. It is really hard to argue that they are not the most ideal candidate to follow the Verocity, and it is right down Hoyoverse storytelling to have a very vague Aeon that we don't know about be in control of one of the biggest and most influential organizations in the entire game. And this is one of the most ancient Aeons, probably the oldest one. It is said that the Preservation rose up during the Dusk Wars to challenge this Aeon. And I really do believe, although many may not know it, but the Preservation is building all of these walls to prepare for the Leviathan's rebirth and return. And maybe that's the IPC's plan. And that is why the IPC really don't follow Claypoth's will whatsoever. They do the exact opposite of what it wants. But the IPC do exactly what the Verocity would want. An insatiable hunger. And once they have control of everything, even their obsessive nature to get control over what they want, Aventurine, you cannot fail. Topaz, you must get your Rillo 6, you cannot fail. That is what Verocity means. It's an obsession. It's an obsessional indulgence. And even that little cryptic scene where Opal crushes Penacony. Maybe this symbolizes how they consume these planets through its resources and all of what they're worth before they eventually leave them as an empty husk. But the IPC are so dialed in that nobody's even aware what they're doing. I mean, some suspect. And Herta is very suspicious of the IPC, so I think she might also be onto them. They have disguised themselves as the Preservation, wanting to enforce the entire universe, preserve it, and sarcastically quote-unquote help everyone. But in reality, it's the Verocity that drives them, that insatiable gluttony to have complete control. over everyone and everything, to consume it, to farm it, to do with what they want, and to feed their Aeon, an Aeon with an endless amount of hunger. And now they've literally created the universe as a streamlined farm for their Aeon, and that there are emanators of the Verocity within the IPC. But that leaves us with one question: what about the Stonehearts and what about Diamond? Because he's an emanator of preservation, and I have no reason to believe that he's lying about that. Diamond is insanely ambitious, and he's slightly lower ranked than the other board members. I think that Diamond is actually trying to reclaim the IPC for the preservation. Don't get me wrong, I don't think their morals are in the right place either, but I think he's created an army of Stonehearts and is genuinely trying to reclaim the IPC in the name of their Amber Lord. At least that's what I think. Either that or they're in on the ruse as well. But I really truly do believe he's an emanator of preservation. I mean, look at the main MC when we went to Eurillo 6. We were genuinely trying to help that planet, so we earned Claypaw's gaze, and we got the lance. This Aeon is paying attention. It is not just mindlessly building its walls for nothing. And if Diamond is an emanator, I gotta believe it's for a reason. But Terravan Kane, on the other hand, nothing about him even adds up with the preservation, but gluttony 100%, which is why people even believe him not to be a follower of the preservation. How can you be an emanator of a path you don't even believe in? You wouldn't even be able to be a path rider, let alone an emanator. That's madness. And now these two ancient Aeons that fought during the Dusk Wars, one of the most ancient conflicts in the entire game that the IPC is frantically trying to cover up. And these two Aeons competing over control of the IPC. And Claypaw trying to build these barriers for when the Leviathans return. But if I'm wrong, and the IPC have nothing to do with Ouroboros, and they truly do follow the preservation, then why in the hell is everything they do not really follow this path? And if that's the case, where do you think Ouroboros will come into play in the Honkai Star Rail game, if not through the IPC? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, but I do hope you enjoyed the video. Like and subscribe if you'd like to see more content like this, and as always, we will see you all in the next one. Later.